Imagine standing at the edge of uncertainty, when the prayers you have poured out seem to echo into silence, when your heart longs for answers, but the heavens remain quiet. In those moments, it is easy to feel forgotten, to wonder if God has turned away, or if your faith is in vain. Yet what if I told you that this silence is not emptiness, but a divine pause, a sacred space where God is working behind the scenes, preparing something extraordinary for your life? What if every unanswered prayer, every delayed blessing, and every quiet moment is actually a setup for a miraculous breakthrough that will surpass your wildest expectations? Tonight we are going to journey into the profound mystery of God's silence and the incredible power of His miracles. We will uncover why the periods of waiting are not obstacles but opportunities, why faith tested in the quiet becomes unshakable, and how hope sustained through uncertainty positions us to witness God's glory in its most powerful form. This is not just a message to inspire. It is an invitation to see your life through the lens of God's eternal plan, to trust that every delay has purpose, and to prepare your heart for a divine intervention that will leave an everlasting mark on your life and the lives of those around you. Stay with me, because what we are about to explore will transform the way you perceive waiting, strengthen the foundation of your faith, and ignite an unwavering hope that no circumstance can shake. By the end of this message, you will not only understand why God has been silent, but you will also be ready to experience the miracle He has been preparing, a miracle that speaks louder than words and confirms His unfailing love, power, and faithfulness in ways that will leave you in awe. This is more than a speech, it is a spiritual awakening, a moment to recognize that God's silence is never absence and His timing is always perfect. It is a call to remain steadfast, to open your heart fully, and to anticipate the miraculous, knowing that the Creator of heaven and earth is about to speak in ways that will forever change your life. Let us embark on this journey together, with faith alive, hope burning, and hearts ready to witness the extraordinary work of God. Divine silence is one of the most mysterious and often misunderstood experiences in the life of a believer. When God seems quiet, when prayers appear to go unanswered, and when the heavens seem closed, it is easy to become anxious, frustrated, or even to doubt His presence. Yet, the truth is that God's silence is rarely an absence. It is purposeful, intentional, and often preparatory. Just as a master builder measures, plans, and organizes before laying the foundation of a great structure, God often works behind the scenes in ways that are invisible to us. During these periods of apparent quiet, He is shaping circumstances, molding character, and aligning the elements of our lives in perfect timing. It is a season of preparation where He strengthens the heart, deepens faith, and cultivates resilience. Many believers struggle because they do not see the full scope of God's activity in their lives. They expect immediate responses, instant miracles, and tangible signs, and when these do not come, fear and doubt creep in. However, the silence of God is not a withdrawal of love or attention. It is a divine strategy to prepare the believer for the fullness of His intervention. The moments of waiting are not wasted. God is orchestrating a scenario in which His power will be undeniably displayed, a situation where the eventual breakthrough cannot be attributed to human effort, but clearly to His divine hand. In that silence, seeds of faith are being planted and watered, even if we cannot yet see their growth. Silence can also serve as a refining fire for the soul. In the quiet, God reveals what truly resides in the heart. Are we depending on Him completely, or are we relying on our own understanding and strength? Are we ready to trust Him even when circumstances are overwhelming? The stillness is a time for introspection, repentance, and surrender. It is an invitation to relinquish control, to stop striving in our own power, and to lean wholly on His wisdom and timing. Often, it is in this hidden work that God ensures that when He finally moves, the miracle is received with full gratitude and faith. Moreover, divine silence is not random. It is a sign of the careful and deliberate work God is doing. Just as a farmer does not rush the growth of crops, but waits for the proper season, God allows the unfolding of His plan in its perfect time. The delay is a part of his strategy to ensure that the outcome is both powerful and lasting. Many times, if God acted immediately, the miracle would not have the impact intended, or the believer would not have the spiritual maturity to handle it rightly. The waiting period produces endurance, patience, and a deepened understanding of God's nature. It cultivates a perspective that values eternal outcomes over temporary relief. The key for believers during this time is to remain steadfast, to keep praying, to continue serving, and to maintain a heart of worship. Silence does not mean neglect, and inactivity in our spiritual lives can hinder the flow of divine preparation. When we continue to align our hearts with His will, obey His word, and nurture our relationship with Him, we become vessels ready to receive the miraculous. The period of silence becomes a sacred space for God to perfect His plan, to coordinate circumstances, and to prepare us for the moment when His power will be undeniably evident. In every instance of divine silence, there is an invitation to trust beyond what is seen, to have confidence that God is at work in ways we may not yet comprehend. It is a reminder that His timing is perfect, His wisdom is unsearchable, and His love is steadfast. Even when the world is noisy and solutions seem elusive, the silence of God signals that He is preparing something extraordinary, a breakthrough that will exceed human expectation and glorify His name in ways that words cannot describe. The period of divine silence teaches the believer to depend not on visible evidence, but on the unshakable promises of God, to cultivate patience and to strengthen faith. It reassures that every delay has a purpose, every quiet moment has meaning, and every season of waiting is a preparation for the manifestation of His power and glory. Faith is often tested most profoundly in the seasons of waiting, in the moments when God's voice seems distant and the answers to our prayers are delayed. These periods are not signs of abandonment, but opportunities for spiritual growth, refinement, and the strengthening of trust in the Lord. When circumstances appear stagnant and hope seems dim, believers are called to lean not on what they see, but on the unchanging nature of God. Faith tested in waiting is a faith that refuses to collapse under pressure, a faith that continues to believe in God's goodness, wisdom, and timing, even when understanding is limited. It is in these quiet, unseen struggles that the roots of genuine faith grow deep, anchoring the soul in divine truth and resilience. The testing of faith in waiting is often uncomfortable and challenging because it confronts human impatience, desire for control, and reliance on immediate results. Many times, believers are tempted to take matters into their own hands, to force solutions, or to settle for less than God's perfect provision. However, God's design in testing faith is to teach trust, to remind the believer that His plan is greater than human understanding. The delay forces reflection and dependence, encouraging the heart to cultivate patience, endurance, and spiritual insight. This is the period where character is refined and superficial belief is transformed into unwavering conviction. During waiting, the believer learns the profound value of perseverance. Each unanswered prayer, each silent moment becomes an exercise in spiritual discipline, a chance to strengthen reliance on God rather than on fleeting circumstances. Faith grows as believers choose to hold on to promises rather than problems, to see beyond the immediate challenges and to anticipate God's timing with confidence. The testing period reveals the depth of love and commitment a believer has for God. True faith is not measured in moments of ease, but in the steadfastness shown when life is uncertain, when outcomes are unclear, and when the path forward is shrouded in mystery. Waiting also cultivates a deeper intimacy with God. As the believer wrestles with unanswered prayers, doubts, and uncertainty, there is an opportunity for prayer, reflection, and alignment with His will. In the absence of immediate answers, the believer is drawn into a closer relationship with God, learning to trust His character, wisdom, and faithfulness, rather than seeking constant reassurance. This spiritual closeness strengthens the heart for the eventual revelation of God's work and ensures that the miracle, when it comes, is received with gratitude, humility, and awe. The testing of faith in waiting produces spiritual maturity and resilience. It teaches the believer that life is not defined by circumstances, but by trust in the Lord. That true strength emerges not from human ability, but from reliance on divine power. These periods cultivate patience, humility, and a profound understanding that God's timing is perfect. The believer learns to endure setbacks without bitterness, to maintain hope without visible evidence, and to continue in obedience despite uncertainty. Every moment of waiting becomes a crucible where faith is strengthened, perspective is renewed, and hope is deepened. Moreover, faith tested in waiting shapes the believer's perspective on miracles and divine intervention. When God finally moves, the breakthrough is more powerful and transformative because it follows a season of growth and preparation. The believer's faith has been fortified, and the heart is ready to receive the miracle with recognition of God's hand in every detail. Waiting is not passive, it is active trust, a commitment to stand firm in hope, to hold fast to God's promises, and to remain obedient even when answers are delayed. The period of testing is also a witness to others. When a believer maintains faith during prolonged waiting, it serves as a testimony of God's faithfulness, inspiring others to trust and persevere. It demonstrates that waiting is not a sign of weakness, but an essential part of spiritual growth, a necessary process through which God cultivates endurance, reliance, and deeper understanding of His ways. In the testing of faith, God reveals His power, strengthens His people, and prepares them for the extraordinary work He is about to accomplish. Faith tested in waiting is ultimately a journey of trust, endurance, and spiritual maturity. It reminds believers that God's silence is never empty, that His timing is perfect, and that every moment of waiting is an opportunity to grow closer to Him, to deepen reliance on His promises, and to prepare the heart for the miraculous work He has planned. Miracles are the unmistakable fingerprints of God, visible signs of His power and love in the world, and they often come when believers remain steadfast in faith and obedience. God does not act arbitrarily or without purpose. His interventions are deliberate, aligned with His divine will, and often follow seasons of patience, testing, and perseverance. Miracles are rarely bestowed upon those who are idle or indifferent, but rather upon those who continue to trust, serve, and walk in obedience, even when the path is unclear or the outcome uncertain. They are the fruit of a life surrendered to God, a life that refuses to compromise, a life that remains faithful in the unseen and unwavering in hope. Obedience is the soil in which miracles grow. When believers choose to follow God's commands, maintain integrity, and act in accordance with His word, they position themselves to receive His extraordinary intervention. God honors hearts that are aligned with His purposes, hearts that obey not out of obligation but out of love and reverence. Often it is in moments when the world offers no hope, when human solutions have failed, and when circumstances seem impossible, that God demonstrates His glory through miraculous acts. The miracle is not merely the resolution of a problem. It is a testimony of divine faithfulness, a tangible expression of God's presence, and a confirmation that obedience to Him produces results beyond human capability. Faithfulness in small things is often rewarded with great demonstrations of power. God notices the quiet acts of devotion, the consistent prayers, the patient endurance, and the humble service rendered without recognition. These acts of obedience are not overlooked, and they lay the foundation for miraculous outcomes. When the believer chooses to remain faithful despite trials, the miracle becomes both a personal blessing and a public testament to God's goodness. The timing of these interventions is often perfect, arriving at the exact moment needed to transform circumstances, restore hope, and glorify God's name. Miracles also serve as confirmation of God's promises. Life often presents situations that seem beyond repair, challenges that appear insurmountable, and losses that feel permanent. Yet God intervenes through His miraculous power to show that He is faithful to fulfill His word. These divine actions reinforce the believer's trust, strengthen faith, and inspire perseverance in the face of adversity. When believers witness or experience a miracle, it is not merely a resolution of difficulty. It is a spiritual awakening, a reminder that God is in control, and a call to continue living in obedience and faith. Obedience in the face of uncertainty requires courage, humility, and unwavering trust. The believer must often step forward without seeing the full picture, act in alignment with God's instructions, and maintain hope even when human reasoning suggests otherwise. Miracles are frequently the culmination of such persistent faith and loyalty. They are the moments when God reveals His power and love in ways that cannot be ignored or explained by human effort alone. The miraculous reminds believers that their lives are not governed solely by human limitations, but by a sovereign God who works through obedience, perseverance, and trust to accomplish extraordinary outcomes. The interplay of obedience and miracles is also a testimony to the broader community of faith. When one believer experiences God's miraculous intervention, it encourages others to remain steadfast, to obey even in difficult circumstances, and to trust in the unseen workings of God. Miracles inspire hope, ignite faith, and demonstrate that a life fully surrendered to God is a life open to extraordinary possibilities. They reveal the power of God's hand in human history and show that obedience is not merely a spiritual principle, but a pathway to experiencing His tangible presence and transformative power. Ultimately, miracles are not random acts of favor, but deliberate expressions of God's will that often follow lives of faithful obedience. They are designed to glorify God, uplift believers, and confirm His promises. Those who remain steadfast, who obey in quiet devotion, and who trust God despite challenges, position themselves to witness these divine interventions. Miracles become the visible demonstration of God's glory, the reward of faithful hearts, and the answer to prayers that have been offered with patience, hope, and unwavering faith. God often communicates in ways that transcend words, speaking through actions, circumstances, and supernatural interventions rather than verbal messages. While the human expectation is for clear, audible guidance, the divine method of communication can be profoundly different, using miracles, provision, and transformative experiences as the language of His will. These manifestations are deliberate, powerful, and unmistakable, revealing God's heart, His purposes, and His sovereignty. When God chooses silence in speech, it is not absence, but a signal that He is orchestrating events to convey His message through something far greater than words, tangible demonstrations of His power and love. Believers must cultivate spiritual awareness to recognize these divine communications. Miracles often arrive unexpectedly in ways that defy human understanding, and they are accompanied by a sense of awe and clarity that confirms their source. God's voice through a miracle speaks to the heart with undeniable authority, confirming His promises and illuminating the path forward. It is in these moments that the invisible becomes visible, the impossible becomes possible, and the believer comprehends that God's plan is unfolding with precision. The power of this communication is that it leaves no room for doubt. The miracle itself becomes a testimony, a living proof of God's presence, wisdom, and care. God's methods of speaking often require patience, attentiveness, and spiritual discernment. Believers must learn to look beyond immediate circumstances, to see beyond human reasoning, and to recognize His interventions in the ordinary as extraordinary. The ways in which He communicates may not always align with human timing or expectations, but they are purposeful and intentional, designed to teach reliance, strengthen faith, and draw attention to His glory. When a miracle occurs, it is a declaration that God is at work, that His promises are reliable, and that His timing is perfect, even if it appeared delayed or silent beforehand. Miracles as communication also serve to redirect focus. In times of struggle, the human tendency is to panic, to question, or to pursue solutions through human effort alone. God's supernatural interventions shift the attention from human limitations to divine omnipotence. They reveal that the believer is not alone, that God is intimately involved, and that the circumstances are under His control. By speaking through miracles, God reminds his people that faith must be anchored not in what is seen or immediately understood, but in his character, his promises, and his ultimate authority. The miracle becomes both message and messenger, conveying encouragement, reassurance, and divine instruction simultaneously. Furthermore, God's communication through action has a communal dimension. When believers witness his power, provision, or miraculous intervention, it strengthens not only personal faith, but also the collective faith of the community. Testimonies of divine action inspire hope, encourage persistence, and deepen understanding of God's active presence in the world. The impact extends beyond the individual, revealing God's glory and prompting others to trust him more fully. In this way, miracles serve as a profound and visible form of preaching, illustrating the truths of Scripture and the reliability of God's promises without a single spoken word. The language of miracles also cultivates awe, humility, and reverence. When God acts in ways that surpass natural explanation, it reminds believers of his transcendence, power, and wisdom. Human comprehension is limited, yet God communicates in ways that are universally understood through impact and effect. The miracle testifies to his omnipotence and encourages hearts to rely wholly on him rather than on human ingenuity. Through these acts, God ensures that his message is not only received but remembered, leaving a lasting impression that strengthens faith, trust, and obedience. Ultimately, when God chooses silence in verbal communication, it is a prelude to a far more profound revelation. Miracles, divine provision, and supernatural interventions are his voice made visible, his guidance made tangible, and his love made undeniable. They speak to the believer with clarity, authority, and power, calling for faith, obedience, and recognition of his sovereignty. In every miraculous occurrence, God communicates that he is present, he is faithful, and he is actively orchestrating events for the good of those who trust him. Hope is the lifeline of the believer, especially in moments when God's voice seems silent and circumstances appear overwhelming. It is hope that sustains the heart, strengthens the spirit, and keeps faith alive when human understanding falters. During periods of silence from God, believers are invited to anchor themselves in his promises rather than their immediate experiences, to trust in his timing rather than in the urgency of their own desires. Hope is not passive, it is an active, living force that propels the believer to remain steadfast, to persevere in prayer, and to continue walking in obedience, even when visible evidence of divine intervention is absent. It is hope that transforms waiting into preparation, anxiety into trust, and uncertainty into confident expectation of God's miraculous work. When God appears silent, hope becomes both shield and guide. It protects the believer from despair, fear, and doubt, while directing attention toward the unseen work of God. The moments of quiet are not empty, but are filled with divine purpose, as God is preparing circumstances, molding hearts, and aligning events according to his perfect plan. Hope allows the believer to see beyond the present difficulty, to anticipate the fulfillment of God's promises, and to believe that the breakthrough is imminent. It nurtures patience, perseverance, and spiritual resilience, providing the strength needed to endure trials without compromise or discouragement. Hope is deeply connected to trust in God's character. It flourishes when the believer remembers his faithfulness, reflects on past deliverances, and holds fast to the certainty that God is unchanging. Even when prayers seem unanswered and the silence feels prolonged, hope reassures that God has not abandoned his people and that his plans are perfect. It turns moments of uncertainty into opportunities for spiritual growth, encouraging believers to maintain a perspective rooted in divine truth rather than fleeting human perception. This hope is a quiet confidence that God is at work behind the scenes, orchestrating circumstances for ultimate good, and preparing the miraculous intervention that will reveal his glory. The cultivation of hope during silence also involves active engagement with God's Word. Scripture provides the foundation for hope, offering promises that are reliable, encouragement that is steadfast, and examples of God's faithfulness throughout history. By meditating on His Word, believers strengthen their hope, reinforce their trust, and deepen their understanding of God's nature. Hope is nurtured as believers internalize His promises, declare them in prayer, and anchor their hearts in the assurance that God's silence is temporary and purposeful. It becomes a sustaining force, guiding their steps and sustaining their faith through seasons of waiting. Hope does more than sustain the individual. It prepares the heart for God's miraculous intervention. The believer who holds on to hope is positioned to recognize and embrace the manifestation of God's power when it occurs. Hope ensures that the miracle is met with faith rather than fear, gratitude rather than entitlement, and recognition rather than disbelief. It transforms anticipation into readiness, aligning the heart with God's timing and ensuring that the moment of divine action produces maximum spiritual impact. Hope makes the believer a vessel prepared to receive and carry the testimony of God's glory, amplifying the effect of His miraculous work not only in their life, but in the lives of others. Hope also strengthens the community of faith. When believers maintain hope amidst silence, their example inspires others to trust, persevere, and anticipate God's intervention. Testimonies of steadfast hope encourage those facing trials, cultivate a culture of trust in God's promises, and demonstrate that divine timing is perfect. Hope becomes a beacon of light, a testimony of spiritual maturity, and a source of encouragement that spreads beyond the individual to touch the hearts of many. It builds faith collectively, reinforcing the reality that God is always at work, even when His actions are unseen. Ultimately, hope during periods of divine silence is an essential ingredient for spiritual endurance, faithfulness, and preparation for the miraculous. It invites believers to trust in God's perfect timing, rely on His promises, and anticipate His supernatural intervention with confidence. Hope transforms waiting into a sacred journey, aligns the heart with God's will, and ensures that when He finally acts, the miracle is received with the full measure of faith, gratitude, and recognition of His glory. It reminds believers that God is never idle, that His plans are flawless, and that His power is about to be revealed in ways that exceed human expectation and understanding. When God acts through a miracle, the outcome is never merely a change in circumstance. It is a revelation of His glory, power, and faithfulness. Miracles serve as unmistakable signs that God is actively at work, intervening in human affairs to demonstrate His sovereignty and love. They are not random events or coincidences, but intentional expressions of His divine will, carefully orchestrated to accomplish a greater purpose. Each miraculous intervention confirms that God is not distant or indifferent, but intimately involved in the lives of His children. The miracle magnifies His presence, testifies to His reliability, and strengthens the faith of those who witness or experience it firsthand. The transformative nature of a miracle is profound because it extends beyond the physical or material realm into the spiritual. When God intervenes, He validates the prayers, obedience, and perseverance of His people. A miracle is a confirmation that enduring faith, patient waiting, and steadfast hope are never in vain. It demonstrates that God's promises are certain, even when delayed, and that His timing is perfect. For the believer, witnessing a miracle is a powerful reminder that God works in ways that surpass human understanding, and that no challenge or obstacle is beyond His ability to overcome. The impact is both immediate and lasting, reshaping perception, inspiring trust, and deepening spiritual insight. Miracles also glorify God in ways that ordinary experiences cannot. They draw attention to His majesty and remind both the believer and those around them of His ultimate authority over creation. When circumstances defy logic, when human resources are insufficient, and when solutions seem impossible, a divine intervention becomes a testimony that God alone is capable of the extraordinary. The miracle is not merely for personal benefit, but serves to magnify His name, to bear witness to His faithfulness, and to inspire awe in hearts that recognize His hand at work. Through miracles, God communicates to the world that He is alive, active, and sovereign, reinforcing the reality of His power for all to see. Furthermore, miracles strengthen the faith community by providing visible proof of God's involvement. When believers share testimonies of His miraculous work, they encourage one another, build collective confidence in His promises, and inspire hope in those facing trials. A single miracle can ripple through a congregation or community, igniting renewed trust, perseverance, and spiritual fervor. It affirms that God is not limited by human circumstances, that He honors faithfulness, and that His plans are always designed to glorify Him while benefiting those who trust Him. Miracles become a shared language of divine presence, uniting believers in awe, gratitude, and worship. The confirmation of God's glory through miracles also cultivates humility and reverence in the hearts of believers. When confronted with evidence of His power, the natural response is acknowledgement that human effort alone cannot achieve such outcomes. This humility strengthens reliance on God, deepens devotion, and reinforces the understanding that faith is not about personal capability, but about surrender to His will. The miracle teaches that God's ways are higher than ours, His wisdom surpasses our understanding, and His love is unending. It invites believers to worship not only for the provision received, but for the character of God revealed through His miraculous action. Moreover, miracles often serve as catalysts for spiritual awakening and transformation. They inspire believers to examine their faith, renew commitment, and recognize areas where deeper trust and obedience are needed. The power of a miracle is not limited to the immediate effect, but extends into long-term spiritual growth, shaping character, fortifying faith, and reinforcing the believer's dependence on God. It serves as a reminder that God is always at work, even in silence, and that His ultimate desire is to bring glory to Himself while blessing those who faithfully follow Him. Ultimately, the miraculous confirmation of God's glory is a profound expression of His presence, power, and love. It strengthens believers, inspires communities, humbles the heart, and transforms lives. Through the miracle, God communicates His faithfulness, honors steadfastness, and demonstrates that no challenge is too great for His intervention. It is a living testimony that His glory is revealed not in words alone, but in tangible, powerful acts that leave an indelible mark on the believer, the community, and the world, reminding all that He is sovereign, faithful, and infinitely capable of the extraordinary. As we reflect on the journey through the mysteries of God's silence and the power of His miraculous interventions, we are reminded that the periods of waiting, the moments of uncertainty, and the times when prayers seem unanswered are never empty or meaningless. God's silence is purposeful. It is a divine pause that prepares our hearts, refines our faith, and strengthens our trust in His perfect timing. Every trial, every delay, and every challenge we face is a part of His orchestration, a careful alignment of circumstances designed to bring about outcomes that will reveal His glory, demonstrate His faithfulness, and transform our lives beyond what we can imagine. It is in these seasons of quiet that God positions us to witness the extraordinary, to experience His power in ways that speak louder than words, and to recognize that His plans are far greater than our own understanding. Throughout our journey, we have seen that faith, tested in waiting, is not a period of weakness, but a season of growth. When we persevere, remain steadfast, and continue to trust God despite the silence, our faith is strengthened, our hearts are purified, and our spiritual vision is sharpened. The waiting becomes an opportunity to cultivate endurance, humility, and a deeper intimacy with God. It is through this steadfast trust that we prepare ourselves to receive the miraculous, to recognize His intervention, and to respond with gratitude and awe. The miracle does not simply change our circumstances, it confirms God's promises, glorifies His name, and inspires those around us to place their trust in Him as well. Obedience, even in the face of uncertainty, is a key element in positioning ourselves for God's miraculous work. God honors hearts that remain faithful, that act with integrity, and that continue to walk in alignment with His word, even when the outcome is not immediately visible. Through obedience, the believer becomes a vessel ready to receive divine intervention, and the miracle that follows becomes a testimony not only of God's power, but also of His faithfulness to those who trust Him. Miracles speak in ways that words cannot, revealing God's presence, His love, and His sovereignty, and they leave an enduring impact that transforms our lives and encourages the faith of others. Hope plays a central role in sustaining us through the silence. It is the anchor that keeps our hearts steady, the light that guides us when the path is unclear, and the force that transforms waiting into preparation. By holding fast to hope, we trust that God is actively working behind the scenes, orchestrating circumstances for our good, and preparing the perfect moment for the miraculous to unfold. This hope empowers us to remain faithful, to continue praying, and to persevere in obedience, knowing that God's intervention is coming in His perfect timing and in ways that will exceed our expectations. In conclusion, let us embrace the seasons of silence as times of divine preparation, trusting that God is always at work even when we cannot see it. Let us remain steadfast in faith, obedient in action, hopeful in heart, and ready to witness His miraculous power when it manifests. Every trial, every delay, and every quiet moment is a part of His plan to reveal His glory, strengthen our faith, and bring about outcomes that will testify to His greatness. As we continue on our journey, let us remember that God's silence is never absence. His timing is always perfect, and His power is boundless. May we remain faithful, hopeful, and expectant, confident that the miracle He has promised is on its way, and that it will glorify His name in ways that leave an eternal impact on our lives and the lives of those around us. Thank you all for your time, your hearts, and your willingness to receive this message. May God bless each of you abundantly, strengthen your faith, and fill your lives with hope, joy, and the undeniable evidence of His miraculous power.